Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for number 6 in our First Peter study with Kyle Eidelman. We are here in chapter 4. We're going to be covering the entirety of chapter 4 today as best that we can. Obviously, we're going to not be able to tackle everything, but we'll hit some of the highlights and talk about some things that Kyle talked about in his video. Hopefully you've watched that. If not, feel free to go ahead and click above. It's a good one. But we are going to start with sort of the theme of this chapter, which is really how do you tell that someone is committed to their faith, to being a Christian, for instance. And of course, Kyle talks about people who wear special hats or have dots on their forehead and these sort of outward expressions of, I'm a follower of this belief. And what is that for Christians? Because there have been some, throughout history, some different external things, and even for Christians. And some people still search that today. They need a tattoo or a special bracelet or a cross necklace or just something that usually it's very personal.
We both have
I
some
have
sort of
a WWJD bracelet.
I got a cross bracelet.
Hey.
That's funny. That's funny. All right, go ahead.
But we look for those things not only just to signify to other people, but just as a reminder to ourselves of we are Christians. And so we unpack here in 1 Peter that probably one of the main ways has nothing to do with something that you put on yourself. It's nothing that you can post necessarily, although certainly people try to do that. It's something that's much deeper and much more internal. Of course, it's matters of the heart. You tell if someone's a Christian by the way that they live their life and by the way that they love people. And that may not be a shocker to many of you, but that is really what Peter is honing in on here in 1 Peter chapter 4. Initial thoughts on that?
I really connected to 2 points that Kyle Eidelman made that obviously come from this passage that I think are really particularly applicable to where we are now. So one, he talked about arming ourselves ahead of time. This has been a message that we've been given. You know, you as a youth minister, this is a consistent message for kids, but man, that message doesn't stop with kids. That is something for all of us to be prepared now for trials and tribulations that are to come. And I think culturally, one of the things that we've observed, and we've discussed this even in this setting, is that Christianity does not enjoy the status that it once did in our culture. So now is a good time to really dig into arming ourselves, to use the words that he did, arming ourselves for what that may look like in the future, and arming ourselves now to defend ourselves against it. And the second thing, you talk about the way we treat other people. What really stood out to me was that comment that I just made, that Christianity doesn't enjoy the same status that it used to serve in our culture. Where do we see that most often? And I realize I haven't prepped you for this question. Where does that play out most often for us in our culture right now? Do you think?
But my first thought is not the one you're thinking of. I just thought Netflix in my mind.
No, that's right.
Is that right?
That is right. Sort of. Digitally. Digitally.
Absolutely.
All right. So it plays out. So when I say that Christianity doesn't have the same kind of status that it had in our culture once upon a time, I'm talking digitally is largely where we see that.
Right.
So whether it's narratives that are being supported or not supported, or whether it's just in people's social media posts, oftentimes our markers, our identifiers of who we are what we put out into the world on social media and what we put out into the world digitally. And so I say that, I was watching the video, Kyle Eidelman's video. I don't like saying that name all at once because I always trip it up. But one of the things that I wrote was, he says, don't trade insults for insults. I wrote 2 quick things. I wrote one, that a lot of our conflict is happening on our social networking sites. So we need to keep in mind when we have these moments where we're engaging with other people in the digital world, that's kind of the public square now. And we need to be cautious in how we engage with people. And I wrote the note for Christians, there should be a noticeable absence of insults on your Facebook posts. There should be a noticeable absence of insults in your digital footprint. Now,
when you give grace to someone, that's just in person. I think I've read that. That does not apply to Facebook or Instagram.
Right. No, those rules are completely different. Digital you is a different you. There should be, for Christians, there should be a noticeable absence of insults on your and attacks and of unchristian behavior. There should be a noticeable absence of that on your social media feeds, both your public ones and your private ones where you're using a burner name because you intentionally want to do exactly what I just described. I realize that what I just said may sound like it's really specifically targeting kids, but I know a lot of adults who have accounts on Twitter or on other social networking sites that do not have their names or faces so that they can specifically engage in a non-Christian attacking type manner. So that's what jumped out at me.
It just makes me think of when you talk about being a different person on social media. It just makes me think of we're all very aware of when we're in a car and we are angry at someone for some reason in that moment in the car, communicating with another car. It's a lot easier to insult that person, and insult's probably a strong word, but and the way that we feel towards that person would be totally different than if they, cut us off in a grocery line. Maybe it wouldn't for some people, but the things that we're willing to do or say because we're in that bubble of the car, it's a little bit different. I think the same is true of social media, and there's some sort of disconnect that I think we fool ourselves to believe that because I'm in this bubble, or because culturally it's become more okay to be insulting and to say these attacking things. And that's a great indicator for us of, hey, this is where our paths diverge. I'm a Christian, and I can't go that way culturally where the world is going up. It's okay to be this way on social media. And that should not be strange to us, because that kind of difference a lot of times incites suffering, because there's things that we want to do and choose not to, or there's things that people expect for us to do and we choose not to, and that brings on suffering. All these things should not be surprises to Christians. We are following a Savior who suffered all sorts of things.
That's right.
And when we get to partake in that suffering, that is a joyous time, and that is that marker of, yes, I am following the Christian way because the way I live my life, because the way I choose to love people, there is going to be suffering. I'm not protected from that suffering in some special way. And there may be some people who will make a mockery of you of, your cancer came back, where is your God kind of rhetoric.
Sure.
And that is a badge of honor for us. Yeah, we're going to go through suffering. I mean, not that I can earn my salvation at all, but the fact that I get to suffer alongside Christ, or have some sort of suffering alongside Christ, that is a joyous thing.
Absolutely.
I don't know where I'm going off with all that, but that's where my mind is going.
Well, I appreciate the thoughts, and I think again they're really applicable to where we are now. You're hovering around verse 12.
Yeah.
Dear friends, do not be surprised at the painful trial you are suffering, as though some strange thing were happening to you.
And you may not, just real quick, you may not feel like you're suffering right now. Sorry, I don't want to take you
No,
off
go
your
ahead.
there.
Perfect. Go ahead.
You may not feel like you're suffering right now, and that could be a red flag. You may want to think, why am I not suffering right now? But also, what you've referred to before of the storms that are coming to us.
Yeah.
If we're not in one right now, we're either, I remember a preacher once said, you're either about to be in a storm, or currently in a storm, or you're just getting out of a storm. And that's always true. And so the preparation of working on yourself, working on your faith during those times where you feel like, the storm, I'm pretty storm free right now. I must be driving pretty good with God. And sometimes I feel like we let things slip in those moments, and we're not as focused on our faith.
I agree. I can tell you this: when it comes to the motivation, the whole preparing now, right?
Yes.
So preparing now for the future. When it comes to the motivation for that, what's interesting for us as human beings, we have a tendency in the middle of the storm to say, well, now's not the time to bolster and prepare because I'm right in the middle of this. Let me get through this first.
That's right.
And then when we're out of it, we have a tendency to say, well, I don't really have the headspace for this now. I'm in a good place.
That's right.
I just want to relax and unwind.
That's right.
And so there's never a time where we're willing to say, okay, all the circumstances are right. I'm ready to do my deep dive on Christian preparedness for the storms that could come. So there's not going to be a good time to do it. So if you're watching this video today, now's the time to start doing that.
That's right. I'm thinking from a teenage perspective, you're either coming up to the big final, and things are stressful, and maybe things are stressful at home because of mom and dad's job situation, whatever it is. It seems like that's the exact time of, I just don't have the bandwidth or the emotional capacity to work on my faith right now. When that is the exact time you should be working on your faith. And then just like you said, when things are going smooth sailing, grades are looking good, you got easy assignments, mom and dad aren't on your case, you think, man, why should I work on my faith when everything seems to be going right now? If it's not broke, let's not fix it. And man, talk about the storm of 2020 how Christians are performing in the midst of suffering. And to the outsider, that is the big indicator. Not just how we live our life as Christians, not just how we choose to love people, but how we do those two things in the midst of when it's tough to do it. When it'd be very easy to focus on ourselves and the suffering that we're going through.
Yep. No, I'm with you. Again, and I know it's kind of the third time we've circled back around this, but now's the time. It's a weird moment in our culture. It's a weird moment in our lives. Now's the time.
We were joking about verse 7 earlier because it has this kind of apocalyptic language of
Yeah.
the end of all things is at hand.
And now
how
the perfect time
how we
to
kind
read
of
that
relates
verse.
that with 2020.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that when Kyle Idleman talks about this verse, he brings out something I hadn't thought about. This is actually a very positive
That it
thing
was
he's trying to point
intended to
out.
be uplifting?
This is actually to be, hey,
Yeah.
you're going through suffering, but guess what? The finish line is right there. Your muscles are burning or aching,
Yeah.
your lungs are on fire, but guess what? That's the finish line right over there. And
Yeah.
we have to keep suffering. We have to keep pressing on so that we can get to that finish line. The end of all things is at hand. And yeah, that's not a depressing.
No, it's not nihilist. Like
no,
it's not.
no,
It's
no,
all
no.
gonna. It's no point in
It's
any
keep
of
it up, guys.
There's-
You're almost
yes,
there. You are almost there.
This all of the hurt that you're suffering through right now is temporary. The spiritual hurt, the physical hurt, the emotional and relational and familial hurt. It's real. It's powerful. Don't let me take that away from you. But goodness, the end is near. And that was you like Kyle Idleman said, and you just reiterated that was meant to be a sentence of encouragement.
That's right.
And we should hear it as such in this culture.
I'm thinking I want to end on a positive. If that's,
Great.
if that's okay with you. But it's actually not the
That
end.
was a positive.
It was a positive,
Yeah.
but even more positive.
Got it.
And maybe a little bit of not an admonition. What's the thing you say when you're trying to, invoke a response from people?
A question.
Yeah. Okay. A question. Maybe a conviction. We're going to convict a little
Conviction's
bit.
good. That works.
You're right.
Well, let's find out. Let's hear
Let's
first.
see what I'm going to say.
And then we'll judge it.
And then we'll judge.
Then we'll judge it.
So not the end of the chapter, but let's see. Starting here in, let's say, verse 10. Verse 10, 11. This idea of you're in suffering, but you have received these gifts, and these gifts serve a purpose of being able to serve one another.
Yeah.
And it is exactly in times like this, where in like 2020, we're very quick to identify gifts and think, how can they serve us? How can they get us through these times?
Right.
And it's that exact time where we need to be thinking about others and how is my gift going to help other people through this time? And for the not for the sake of ourselves and pointing fingers at ourselves and look at the things I'm good at, but the sake of how am I going to point fingers towards God through the things that I can do? And I want to end on a positive, just in the way of saying I have seen that time and time again from our Eastridge members of people saying I have this giftedness. Times are different. Things are tougher in some ways, but at the same time, I'm not going to hold back on using my gift to help people out. And I've seen that time and time again. I would start naming names, but I would not be able to cover everyone. I'd leave someone
I
out.
have names that pop
but
in
there
my
are definitely a lot coming up. And so I want to encourage you guys to keep doing that. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, be thinking of those ways that you have this giftedness, these ways that you can be reaching out to others. Anything as simple as changing the oil on a car could be such just such a boon and
Absolutely.
such a supporting thing for some of our widows or some of our single parents, moms who don't know how to do that for themselves. Any skill that you have, that is a useful skill. So be using that skill to glorify God and to serve others.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add. I agree with everything Alan just said.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us today. Remember, we are showing others that we are Christians by the way we live our life, by the way that we love people, especially in times of suffering. You guys have a great day, and we will see you again next week.